The sweeping import tariffs imposed by Donald Trump have deeply shaken the American economy. The heaviest burden of these measures has fallen upon ordinary American citizens. The duties, which were ostensibly levied to pressure foreign nations, were, in reality, paid by American consumers and businesses. According to one report, between 90% and 96% of Americans ultimately bore the cost of these tariffs. Trump should not boast about the revenue generated from these tariffs, as that money actually belongs to low-income and needy Americans. Perhaps the most despicable aspect of this situation is that Trump imposed tariffs of up to 50% on several nations, claiming that by purchasing crude oil from Russia, they were effectively funding the war in Ukraine. Trump's rationale was that he was taking these measures to help bring the conflict to an end. Indeed, this is the very same orangehead, Donald Trump, who launched an attack on Iran without any substantive justification, initiating a new conflict that need never have occurred. The current situation suggests that, in its efforts to bring this war to a close, the United States is being forced to stoop to a level lower than it ever has in its history. The conduct of the Trump administration suggests that they are in dire need of competent economists and military advisors. Between mid-2025 and early 2026, Donald Trump imposed heavy import duties on numerous nations, including China, Mexico, Canada, the European Union, India, and Brazil. Notably, this list included several countries to which the United States is also a major exporter. During this period, the United States generated over $250 billion in revenue solely as a result of these increased tariffs. Trump made this claim via his social media platform, Truth Social. Due to these global tariff hikes, the average import duty rate in the United States surged from approximately 2.6% to roughly 13%. This drastic shift had a direct impact on inflation within the United States. According to a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, these tariffs raised U.S. inflation by approximately 0.7%, meaning that had these tariffs not been imposed, the inflation rate would have remained lower. This implies that Trump's policy structurally increased the prices of goods in the U.S. market, a cost ultimately borne by the pockets of ordinary citizens, rather than by the parties from whom Trump had expected to extract it. Trump's tariffs specifically increased import duties on livestock, sugar, fruits, aluminum, and steel, resulting in a 1.5% to 3% rise in grocery prices. Ground beef prices surged by nearly 13%, while steak prices climbed by 17%. Tariffs ranging from 10% to 25% on phones, televisions, laptops, and small appliances imported from China led to a 5% to 8% increase in their retail prices. Furthermore, furniture, lamps, and decorative items imported from China, Vietnam, and Mexico also became 10% to 15% more expensive. Tariffs imposed on components such as electric car parts, tires, and batteries imported from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union pushed up the prices of new cars by 1% to 3%. Additionally, the cost of repairing and servicing used cars also rose as the prices of spare parts climbed. The tariffs of approximately 25% imposed on steel and aluminum drove up the cost of construction materials, thereby placing additional upward pressure on home building costs and housing prices. Products such as refrigerators, air conditioners, and washing machines also became 4 to 6% more expensive, as steel and aluminum are used in their manufacturing. Trump claimed that these tariffs would be levied on foreign countries, but studies clearly demonstrated that the actual burden fell upon American importers and consumers. According to a study by Germany's Kiel Institute, American companies and consumers bore approximately 96% of the tariff burden, while foreign exporters absorbed only 4%. According to a report by the New York Federal Reserve, 90% of the tariff costs were paid by American importers. Foreign exporters did not lower their prices, but instead reduced the volume of certain products and added the new tariffs directly to their existing prices. According to the Yale Budget Lab, the annual tariff burden on an average American household reached approximately $2,000 during 2025 to 26, money that came directly out of their pockets in the form of increased expenses for groceries, fuel, electricity, and rent. In other words, an extra annual expenditure of $2,000, a direct consequence of Trump's arbitrary tariff hikes. Rather than absorbing the financial loss themselves, retail companies passed the additional tariff costs imposed on importers directly onto their customers through higher prices. Whether at grocery stores, electronics outlets, or automobile dealerships, prices rose across the board. This led to an increase in the Consumer Price Index, CP1, causing everyone to experience the effects of inflation. During this very trade war, China dealt a severe blow by retaliating with heavy tariffs on American agricultural products, particularly soybeans. As a result, American farmers suffered losses amounting to approximately $20 to $25 billion. The situation deteriorated to such an extent that the government was compelled to provide substantial subsidies to rescue the farmers. The rise in tariffs made imports more expensive, thereby increasing operating costs for American companies. Consequently, many companies began relocating their manufacturing plants to countries such as Vietnam and Mexico. This resulted in indirect losses estimated at $50 to $80 billion. Now, looking at the overall impact, according to various international reports, the United States incurred a total economic loss estimated at approximately $100 billion to $150 billion. The Trump administration did not announce any specific relief package to address these American losses. They were aware that their tariff hikes had caused difficulties for Americans. Consequently, instead of a comprehensive relief package, they issued tax relief and exemptions for specific sectors, such as tax cuts for certain industries. However, this relief was primarily directed toward large industries and the corporate sector, rather than ordinary citizens. The additional revenue generated by Trump's tariffs flowed directly into the federal government's treasury. These funds were collected from American importers, who paid the additional duties on their imports. Subsequently, this revenue was incorporated into the government's budget and allocated to other areas, such as infrastructure, national defense, and tax relief. On February 19, 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered a landmark ruling regarding Trump's tariffs. The court declared the global tariffs, imposed under the authority of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to be unlawful. These tariffs had been imposed under the pretext of a national emergency and the fentanyl crisis. However, the court ruled that the IEEPA was not designed to be utilized as an instrument of trade policy. Following the Supreme Court's decision, the IEEPA-based tariffs imposed by Trump were declared illegal, and their collection was halted. Concurrently, a refund process was initiated for all tariff payments that had already been made. Trump's fixation on tariffs was such that he subsequently utilized Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 to reimpose a 10% tariff, a measure that remains legally valid to this day. He later increased this rate further, raising it to 15%. The 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, as well as the tariffs specifically targeting China, remain in effect. However, discussions regarding their review and potential reduction are currently ongoing. American consumers are still enduring the pressure of inflation as prices remain elevated due to tariffs. And now, thanks to Trump's aggressive confrontation with Iran, it appears that the last remaining bit of inflationary pressure is also being realized.